Well, it has been 14 months since Hurricane Ian, and still more than 80,000 Floridians are fighting for their insurance payouts. Well, today marks 6 months until the start of the next hurricane season. So the question on everyone's mind is is the state ready for what next season might bring?
Yeah, and the Weather Channel's national correspondent Justin Michaels was in Florida in the immediate aftermath of Ian and has since gone back to bring us the stories of the slow and at times tedious process of rebuilding.
Well, and Alex and Colleen, it actually could not just be tedious, but also expensive as 2024 kicks in. If it hasn't been expensive enough already, there are two very ominous words that are describing what could come after the next storm: hurricane tax. September 28th, 2022. Hurricane Ian slams southwest Florida with winds as high as 160 miles per hour and a storm surge topping 10 feet. Fort Myers Beach was one of the hardest hit areas. More than a year later, streets are still in shambles. Buildings still closed. Progress is slow, but insurance payouts even slower.
We thought we would be back in the next couple months. It's just, the whole thing is a bizarro world.
Jim Adderholt is still not back in his 9th floor condominium.
We were denied individual policy insurance for loss of use because we can't live there. It's been over a year. The building still cannot be lived in.
So what happens when the next big one hits? We asked Citizens Property Insurance CEO Tim Serio.
Under Florida law, we are required to assess the policyholders of Florida who have other forms of insurance with other private companies, but to assess them to pay citizens' claims.
Citizens Property Insurance is the state-backed insurer of last resort, and now the largest after several private companies went under or left the state altogether. Another major hurricane would wipe out its surplus, leaving all policyholders to foot the bill.
Citizens would be allowed to implement a surcharge not only to its own customers, but to consumers across the state, regardless of who your insurance company is and what type of insurance you have, whether it's home, auto, even pet insurance.
A surcharge, often referred to as a hurricane tax, tacked on top of existing premiums, and could be as much as 15% next hurricane season, and not far off that increase for policyholders from other companies.
And that's why it's a very dangerous situation when your state backstop insurer becomes such a large marketplace.
Adderholt, meanwhile, hired an attorney and sued his insurance company.
Unfortunately, we have some carriers that still haven't paid anything on any of the claims, and it's been more than a year.
It makes it more painful to watch because I know how the insurance system should work, and it's broken here.
So that, again, Jim Adderholt. The reason he says he knows how it should work is because before he retired, Jim was the insurance commissioner for the state of Indiana under then Governor Mike Pence. He was part of regulating the insurance industry in that state, and he does have some best practices, things that we all can do to be ready for whatever could come down the pike from Mother Nature. Take a look at some of these tips that Jim gave us. It's pick a carrier with a solid record and a reputation. Also know your policy limits. Know your deductible. Talk to an insurance agent, any professional. In fact, he even said make your insurance agent your best friend if you live in Florida, and know your flood and wind coverage. An example he gave, it's a worst case nightmare scenario. A neighbor of Jim's has been paying into his insurance there on Fort Myers Beach for what, 2 decades or so while he's been retired and owned his home. He's been paying for the wrong insurance. Ian hits, he wasn't insured, even though he's been paying for insurance the entire time because he had the wrong insurance. Know your policy limits and know what they are. He even said you take your policy documents, 7,500 pages, sit down with your attorney. Let them go through it chapter and verse.
Honestly, it may be worth the money. I mean, the attorneys charge for their time, but having somebody look through it, Dr. Nab says all the time, make your insurance agent your best friend as well, because you want to make sure you've got the right policy, because that's a worst case scenario.
Absolutely.
Can you imagine paying an insurance policy all this time
and then you need it and it's not the right one?
And then they're like, oh, wait, no, actually, you've been paying wrong the whole time.
The whole time. Not just for like a year.
Right.
Decades.
So then you've been paying all this money to get nothing in return. Yeah, I mean, time is money is a saying, right? So spend the time to understand those policies.
And there are a few other variables. Again, the insurance rabbit hole is a deep one. And a few other variables as far as reinsurance and other things that do factor into whether or not there would be that hurricane tax. But the reality is, could we be one storm away? That is truly the reality.
Right. Justin, you've been doing some great work.
Yes,
Thanks for,
thank you.
and hopefully people will hear this and then, fix any problems that they may have. We've got a lot more coverage continuing here on the Weather Channel. Hope you'll stay with us for Storm Center. They pick things up at 5 o'clock Eastern.